Hello and welcome back to Pulumi TV. Today we are live streaming and taking a look at the Pulumi-go-provider, a framework or package to help you build native Pulumi providers in Go. My name is David Flanagan and I'm your host today, but I am joined by my colleague Ian, who is a software engineer at Pulumi, who is going to guide us through everything that we need to know to build a native provider. Hey Ian, how's things?
Things are pretty good.
Awesome. Can you please just take a little bit of time to tell us a little bit about you and what you're working on?
Sure. So as David said, I'm a software engineer at Pulumi, and recently I've been working on making writing providers a little bit cleaner and require quite a bit less boilerplate.
Awesome. Thank you. No, feel free to share more. No, on you go.
So this started out of a hackathon project where we realized that we wanted to write some providers, and it was quite difficult, and there were a lot of pieces that had to fit together perfectly. But so they were strongly synced, but also updated independently. And we thought that there could be a better way to do this because we're all software engineers and we write software for other developers. And it seemed much better that we write software to handle a lot of what we've been doing than do it ourselves manually in a very error-prone way.
Awesome. What were some of the biggest challenges previously before this framework of writing a provider? Is it just all the boilerplate that's required? Are there other specifics that we could share?
So we've had a couple of major problems. One is that there is a lot of boilerplate, but because it's currently implemented as boilerplate, it gets out of date because it's not part of a library. The specific issues within that are you have to write a schema, which is a big JSON or YAML file. The schema has to exactly match your Go code. And there are some subtle interactions there where if small errors like an extra pointer or not can have unfortunate consequences during runtime. So getting that right and up to date was quite of a thing. Deserialization and serialization is a little bit finicky. It has to match the schema exactly. You call different sets of methods. There are different requirements for what constitutes proper deserialization, whether you're doing preview, whether you're running a preview or running an actual Pulumi up, because sometimes values are there and sometimes they're not. Handling optional values correctly, etc. And then the other thing is there's just a lot of methods that you have to implement correctly. And a lot of them you don't care about, except when you do. So handling all of that was a lot of complexity. And having quite a lot of experience with the Pulumi schema, working on it professionally, and quite a lot of experience with the Pulumi engine, it took me a long time to figure out the correct set of things to do. And it shouldn't. So we're trying to fix it.
Nice. So this work on the Pulumi-go-provider is like an opinionated Pulumi way of trying to make this a lot easier for people to write their providers in a native fashion. So we're actually going to attempt to kind of get started today and see how far we can get on writing a native provider. Is that correct?
Yep.
You confident?
Confident we'll get something.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to kind of work through this today and see what we can put together. So the link I will put into the comments for people, but it's just available at github.com/pulumi/go-provider. Ian, if you can share your screen, we'll move over and we'll start talking about this as we make some progress as well.
Okay. So is this good and visible?
Yep, let's just pop over here. Okay, your screen is now live. We can see your terminal.
Okay, so we're going to start by making a new provider. I think the plan was to work on the short IO provider, right?
Yeah, short IO is a URL shortener that has a pretty nice API. It's something that we use on the DevRel team at Pulumi. And I like to do everything as infrastructure as code. So I thought it would be an interesting concept to see if we could build a provider around that.
So the way we start is, this is a Go package. So we're going to create a directory. We're going to go init, and we're going to do go mod init. And I don't remember. So we're also going to do git init because version control is good. I'm going to switch over to that project. Maybe not. I can do it from here. Then to start on building the actual provider, it's a normal Go project. I think traditionally we do something like provider, and then we'll do provider.go, and this works well. It's a structure, but it doesn't really matter. The great thing about this library is that you're just building some Go code, so you can do it however you want. We can do short.go if we want.
Wow, your Vim setup is pretty nice.
This is actually Emacs.
Emacs. Wow.
This is Emacs running Doom, which itself is then running a package called Evil, which does Vim emulation.
Nice. Yeah, I saw this kind of switch between insert and visual and command mode. I just assumed it was Vim. I had no idea it was Emacs. Oh, in fact, it does say it at the top of the title bar, so I should have been paying more attention. But yeah. Nice. The autocomplete and stuff like that, as you've been typing, is pretty sweet.
Yeah, that is also available in Vim. It's all LSP servers, which is also a plug for Pulumi YAML now has an LSP server.
Hey.
Go check it out. It just started to do a release.
I'm just going to tackle one of the questions in the chat while you do a little bit of typing, or we can pause for a second. But Amber is asking, is the session recorded? The session is live on LinkedIn and YouTube and Twitter, but it is also available on YouTube channel at Pulumi, at youtube.com/PulumiTV. So yes, it is available. Sorry, Ian.
No problem. So I'm just going through and setting up basics. We have, I'm gonna try to do this off memory. It's not gonna work. Gets this. And we're gonna return this. Import shows up a lot. I like to shorten it, but of course it's just Go. We're gonna return a provider, and the specific way we're going to do this is the provider library is intended to scale all the way from you, or in this case us, would like to build a relatively small provider to you would like to build a massive programmatically driven provider. So there are different layers. The layer we want to use is the infer layer, which handles, okay, you have some Go code. Please turn it in an opinionated and intelligent way into a Pulumi provider. So this handles things like deriving the schema from the types. And it handles a lot of sane defaults.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand that. So if we use this infer layer from the provider, this just means that we can define type structs for the objects that we're working with, and I'm assuming some CRUD methods, and it kind of generates all the rest for us?
Yep.
Yes. Well, that sounds pretty cool.
We define type structs. We define CRUD methods on those structs. So you don't see Pulumi property maps or RPC struct blobs. You see your arguments and inputs and outputs type. And it will handle deserialization. If the deserialization is wrong, it will error saying, I'm sorry, this field is incorrect, it doesn't match, etc.
Yeah, cool.
So this is the point where I'm slightly less confident. We are now at the point where we should start defining actual resources. Because there's not, like, this will handle driving most of the boilerplate for actually defining the provider.
Okay.
David, do you have any opinions on which resource we should actually implement?
Yeah, I mean, the most important resource from the short IO provider would be the short URL. So they call it a link in their API, so we should call it a link.
Okay. So we would do type link as an empty struct. There's still a little bit of boilerplate. We do link args. You can call it whatever you want, but args make sense. And then there's a type link. I call it state, generally speaking. And because in Pulumi it is common to have the state of a resource also include its inputs, I think it's a relatively useful idiom. We can also just we can embed link args and link state. And then to add this provider, this would be infer, what is it? Resource link args link state. This is using the Go generics feature is strongly used and required.
Ah, cool. I keep meaning to play with
And
Go
we have a
generics, but I haven't
provider.
quite got around to it yet. But okay, so this infer provider, we pass in 3 structs. We got the link args, and the link state. So the args is the inputs that people use to create a new link. Link state is for any computed values or something we get from the API that isn't necessarily an input. So I guess outputs would be I don't know if that's the right terminology here, but maybe. And then
Yep.
link is, I'm actually not sure, what's just the vanilla link struct then?
Link is essentially a place to hang. Link is a namespace, is really
Right.
the way to think about it.
Okay.
It is just it's a place to hang methods. So when there are a lot of methods that you can implement for a resource. Not all of them are required.
Okay.
Specifically, only the create is
So we're using that
required.
as a
So
struct to
link is
attach our receiver methods and the CRUD methods. Is that?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly.
Awesome. You
But
said one
compile,
other
we get an
thing that was.
error.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there.
No, go.
Yeah, you said something that I think was quite interesting there. You said like a good Pulumi idiom is to actually include the input parameters as part of the state. Is there anything more we can share there? Why is that a good idiom? What does that enable?
I find it helpful mostly because when you are then working with this resource, you can assemble the arguments depending on your language immediately as you hand it to the resource. And then if you want to figure out what did you hand in, etc., you can then just like do like your normal dot operator on the output. The other bit that is helpful is that a lot of resources work by having a set of required or a set of optional and required inputs, and then have all the outputs required. In other words, you can give it, for like an AWS bucket, you can give it a bucket name, but if you don't, it will still have a bucket name and it's a required output that you can see.
Okay.
And this makes the code, I think, relatively easy to use just as a consumer of the generated SDK.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense.
There's
Okay.
nothing in the Pulumi engine that requires it.
Got it. Thanks.
Try to compile, we see an error that says link does not implement create because there is one method that every custom resource has to actually implement.
Yeah, this is the same with dynamic
Which is
providers as well, right? Like the only required method that you need is the create method.
yeah, and this kind of makes sense, right? You can come up with, or at least I could come up with a reasonable default for delete, which is do nothing, and for update, which is error out because you can't update, and for read, which is pass in names. But the reasonable the reasonable behavior for create is you got to do something, right?
Yep.
And the way I program Go is I don't remember the method signature. I run the compiler because the compiler is fast. I wait for it to error, and it will tell me what I'm missing.
Clever.
Depending on how exactly we did, yeah. So this is name string, and then we don't need these to have. Oh, yeah, we don't really need these to have the names. So the basic create method works by it takes a context, which is both your timing and your logging. It takes the name of the resource and its inputs, and if it's currently in a preview.
Okay, cool.
And then it outputs the ID, the state, which is a structured link state as given. And then if there's an error, we do the standard Go idiom where the error is at the end, and you can choose. And if you have an error, everything else is ignored, and the error will be displayed to the user.
All right.
So if I'm looking at the API reference for link list, or for link query, am I looking for link queries or link editing, I guess? Create URL probably.
Yeah, there's an API endpoint for creating. I've got it here. Yeah, so if we click,
I see a link. Sorry.
Yeah, link editing, and then create URL, which gives us. They actually have generated Go code that we can use. I can send that, or I can send you the link.
Awesome. I'm on that page.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So if you're on link editing, create URL, and then the 3 drop downs. In fact, I'll just share my screen so the audience can see what we're looking at too. So I'll pop over here for just a second. So this is the short URL API reference, which is not zooming. There we go. And if you click the 3 drop downs here, you can actually select loads of languages. Go is an option, and we can actually see the code that we would require to use Go's built-in HTTP library to send a request to create a link or a resource. I'm now back sharing your screen.
Awesome. So I've copied that, and I'm going to paste it into the create body, and then of course fix it.
Yep.
Some imports.
Copy and paste is how I code. Go code.
So we have. Okay, yeah, great. So we have URL, we have a payload, we have a request, which is going to return an error, which we should probably check. Add some stuff to the request. We perform the request. We read the body. Okay, great. And then we return the result and the body. Great. So now I'm looking essentially into where we're going to have inputs here. So if we type in a domain param.
Yeah, so I think the inputs would be the domain, the short URL, and the long URL.
Great. These are all going to be strings. Let's call them main, short, and long. This is subject to change, but right now, you have to explicitly tell the package that what you have is a Pulumi field and not just a public field that you happen to be using. So we're going to do that here. The way you do that is with the struct annotation. We now have main, a short, and the long field that are all required arguments to the inputs.
Okay. And main should be
if you want me to
domain,
be optional,
sorry. Like, the domain we're using to short. Yeah.
okay. And it probably fuzzed for a second. Great. And then we're going to put these, I believe, in this body. So, what? Domain.
Sorry, they call short original URL capital URL. I wasn't paying attention. But we can call it short. I think it's a better API anyway.
And then the last thing is called...
They call it path.
Thank you.
I guess that brings up like a design decision that maybe others have. I know that I'm now starting to question all my life choices. But does it make sense to kind of map your Pulumi provider API to exactly their API? Or, do you think it's suitable to say, well, actually, I think, it's okay to change it if it provides something that's a bit more fluid or understanding, like, or is it better to just say, no, that's their API, let's use it? I don't know.
That is definitely an interesting question, and I think I will personally defer in that I don't have a great answer. I think it probably depends on how much you know about the API and how bad it is.
True, I guess, yeah. Your mileage may vary to
Like,
make sense to use.
yeah. If you're an expert on how this works and it's also terrible as is, I think it's probably, go right ahead on making it better. If I was doing this for real, and trying to write production code for the short.io provider, I would probably stick to what they have because I don't know it well such that I can have a better idea.
Okay, cool.
It's my personal opinion on this. You, as an implementer, I think this is your curse to bear, which is to choose if you want to copy it exactly or not.
Okay.
And then we have input.domain, input.short, and input.long. And it all autocompletes because it's just a Go struct that's sitting up here, and
yeah, it's short and long
works.
are the wrong way around your parameters.
This
so the original URL is
also
a long one, and then we're shortening it, and they call that the path on the domain. So, yeah. Okay.
And then, do we have any information about the response body, just so we can respond with something?
Yes, we do. The response, we get back a JSON object, and it's going to return either a 200 or a 201. Those are both success. And we get back where's the ID string, capital S, which is probably the only thing that is important at the moment.
Sounds good. So we're going to say as the link state, we take the inputs, and also we're going to do an ID string. And then to get this, it should just be a JSON dot Marshall of res dot body. Will not quite work, but okay. Let's see. We're gonna try this. Remember how to turn I guess we'd have to do. Oh, that's already body. The idea is we are going to unmarshal our return because it's a JSON blob, check the error, and then we should be able to return. We're going to say name is the ID, which means you can only have one of these in your state. If we were being good Pulumi citizens, we would probably postfix that by a random URL. But the nature of or by a random, essentially, set of numbers. But the nature of that random set of numbers tends to be very provider specific. So you are left to implement it here. In the future, there will probably be tools where you say return dot postfix name, and then provide some characterizations, but that does not exist yet. You return a link state. The link args is just input, and where what did I call it? ID state. It's going to be built ID string. Cast a string. And the last thing is we return nil because we have not encountered any errors.
Okay. Well, I think there's one thing that we need to handle for this. This looks really good. I think this is going to work, but we do need to pass through an authentication header.
Okay.
So how do we have access to the Pulumi config? Or should we just hard code it for example today?
We can access it. So you can infer a resource. Essentially the constraint I'm working against is I want to make enough time so I can kind of run this, but it should be quick. We can add a resource. I believe it's with config. I might have to look at the docs. Where you essentially tell, you define another struct. Yeah. Just like resources.
Ah, nice.
And I believe it is actually a resource. IO. It's an argument. So remember what authentication we need to pass through? Is it just username and password?
No, it's just a API token.
Call that token then.
A token, yeah, API token. Token sign.
Have a config.
And then you
Great.
And if you jump down to line, I think plus 20 or something from there. Oh no. Yeah. There we go. Next line.
We have a get config method, which should return an instance of our config. And then we just call it token.
Very cool. This is a really nice API to work with. Like, there's not everything we've written is purely provider logic. You know, there's no scaffolding or boilerplate or anything like that. So this is very cool.
That is the goal. If you want to, probably not for this session. If you want to, you can always, you can essentially, this provides a lot of hidden scaffolding. You can drop down layers if you want to see more and customize more. But the idea is if you just want something simple, this should provide basic building blocks to do it for you.
Yeah. So is what we've done
Um,
now a working provider with a single resource?
yep. Should be enough. If you want to inspect bits, let's see. There are bits of boilerplate that is helpful to see. And the plan is that this all goes into a CLI somewhere. For example, this is currently a library, right? So we need to actually generate the provider itself. We're going to call that Pulumi resource short IO. And we need to actually generate a main function because this is very much all pure Go code. So it needs to be a main to drive it. For this, I will shamelessly copy from a previous thing because it is uninteresting. So for the resource code, we just have this. There. No. Let's see. I've apparently lost what we've been working on, but it is definitely still there. We have a set of imports because this is how it works. Here we have, I believe we don't have it here. I'm not going to do a version. And then we just do this is what actually runs it. This is the driver. And then we want to do error checking because we are good citizens. Something bad happened, print it and exit. The other, we do go build, we get a binary out. Oh. Thinking.
So we've got a provider, a resource. We've got a main for the provider binary. I guess we'd need to generate some sort of SDK next.
Yes. So let's call it Pulumi. For this binary, we'll do doesn't seem to build. Well, okay. If we, yeah. Of course, this is real. I highly recommend. Make files are pretty great. Do this once. We have a binary.
Hey.
The other thing we want to do is get SDKs. This is another bit of boilerplate that will probably go away, but right now it is as we decide on the best way to embed it in some CLI so that it is never touched again, it is still done manually. Traditionally called Pulumi Gen. And this I will also copy. It is somewhat longer, but is very straightforward. And also, anyone is free to copy it from here. All this does is bring in all of our various generators. So this will call SDK CodeGen.
I think I have to update the line on -8 on the left. Because Pulumi string is the example provider, right?
Yes. Yep. Pulumi string is actually going to be turned into a real provider, amazingly enough. The solution. Spelling is hard for some of us. The solution to a lot of the Pulumi YAML, we want a bunch of functions, but we don't want to thread them through the Pulumi YAML language itself, because then they're immutable and you can't replace them, is we're building a couple of providers to handle common functions, including one for string manipulation, which is why string is actually a thing. Version and stir is turned to short.
Awesome.
This is all just generate the SDK in the most boring way. The way you actually get the SDK is there's a get schema function, and it will return a parsed schema that you can call in any provider. Now, if we do this, and we have no bugs, and we say, we can get a schema.
There we go.
So we have a provider, which takes as a property a token. The token is required. We have some resources with these properties. They're all required, and some input properties. Just to, before we actually run anything, I want to show off a couple other bits because this is a very plain and uninteresting schema. You can also do things like find an annotate function, which takes an annotator. And we can do
cool.
And it's relatively normal. I'm going to have a default value, but we will have an environmental variable, which is that. Now, if we rebuild, we should see essentially this show up in the schema. And this annotate function works on the config, and also on link, and also on link args and link state. And also if you just have objects that you use, it works on those too.
Hey, look at that.
this all shows up. Then we can, I hooked this CLI up to Cobra. You can use whatever you want. Language, and I know Go is set up, so I will go with Go. And we get an error.
Oh, just missing the.
I have a reasonable idea of what happened. I suspect that because Go is Go, it is going to need import paths. So there are, unfortunately, there is still some boilerplatey things. So one thing to do is map short index because we want it to be the top level. And I think to do this, what you'd have to do is with language map and then set the import path, which will set it on the schema, which will set it for CodeGen. It might be easier to
do Node.js.
skip that and do Node.js because it is quite a bit easier to generate. So in theory, we see all the normal stuff. We have a runtime, we have a provider, which should define our token somewhere. Yep. We have environment, all this done correctly. Let's see. We have a link file. All the stuff we kind of expect to have.
Sweet.
And then if we go to SDK, yes, yarn link.
Yep.
Awesome. Let us start a new project very quickly. We can just start here. Have a consumer. TypeScript. We should be plain TypeScript. One downside with working on Pulumi full time is that you have a lot of stacks and a lot of them are called some variation on test.
Oh, yep. I've got a few of those.
So our project, we can do yarn link. This linked yarn install. This.
Do you need to make that provider binary available on your path?
Yes, I do. My plan, just to avoid corrupting, well, actually, let's see. There is this is what you should probably not do, but there is a new feature that was just developed for essentially to make it easier to develop providers that allows you to specify where the binary is for a provider. And so let's make sure we have an up-to-date version. We're going to rebuild our binary. go into consumer. Providers. Actually, looking at time, I'm not going to do that just because I do not trust myself to do it quickly enough. You can, however, go to index. This will be short. Let's see if we can do that. Path equals path pack 1 and we can expand path like that. For those not super familiar with shell, all I'm doing is trying to hijack my path for this command. So this, in theory, will work. Or it will reject the version that we created because by default things create with version equal to a version variable. Link does not exist. This is not top level. There's an underlying thing.
Yeah, so the import, yeah. Was it not just short IO dash link? Is that not what I was looking for there?
I think there might have been an additional nest. Nope, maybe not. Ah, yes, we have a real thing now. And now we are doing the typical thing of we have a resource. This is, I don't entirely remember what. Oh, actually, I have a decent sense why. But we have our Pulumi resource. It's called link. It takes some arguments.
Yeah, it needs a domain, a short and a long.
It needs to be arbitrary.
Well, if we want it to work, use raw code.link.
And
short can just be
arbitrary
hello.
or these real.
And long can be google.com or something. And raw code with a K. And I sent you an API token in a private chat if you can see that.
Let's see. I
can send it to you on Slack if that's easier.
I see the token. I'm gonna
You can
stop
flash
sharing my
it.
screen for.
You can just flash it. I'll delete it right
I
after
can.
this session. Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Um,
Or you can use pulumi config secret, which means when you paste it, it shouldn't be visible. Or are you going to hard code it in a code?
I was gonna say that's Pulumi config set
A secret dash secret, yeah.
secret,
And then short IO
and then
token.
this would be.
And then just hit return. Oh. If you hit return, you could have hidden it. Because it will prompt for a secret read line.
Oh,
But it's like I said, I'm going to
sorry.
delete it. This is not a real token. It's an ephemeral token for today. So it's all good.
Um,
So if we look at our stat config,
so.
yeah, there we go.
Have a secret. Great. That is good to know, but not something that I remember. Now the question is, will we be able to get it up or?
Not found Pulumi. Or do you have to import that in the index?
Oh,
Oh, you didn't
yes.
do a yarn install in the generated SDK.
Yeah. Actually, let's do it here. Yeah, it should. Okay. As
Yeah, I don't know.
you can see, we are still getting this experience perfect. And yeah, it's saying it tried to install, it didn't work because we have not published this provider because we are building this provider. But patience, we can get a function out. Now I'm not entirely sure what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's complaining about that either.
Should we try moving this from pure dependencies to dev or to
Yeah, let's try it.
actual dependencies? And then yarn install here. Oh, we probably need to include, if it's in pure dependencies, we probably need to include it in the consumer package. But we'll see if we can get compiling.
Is this because we compiled it with a blank version?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I don't think we don't. I mean, I don't want to keep you past the time, and I think we've shown all the cool bits anyway. Like, we don't need to actually show it working, but you know, we are pretty close. I think that gives people a really good understanding of how they can start to experiment with the Pulumi Go-Provider codebase. And I think what we've seen today is, hold on, I'll switch this back to. There we go. Yeah, I think what we've seen today is really awesome. You know, the ability to build a native provider with just defining a couple of structs and a single create method I think the use of all the generics to tie that together was really, really cool. Like you said, this is early. This is something that is started as a hackathon project and is being developed uh, presently, and is going to continue to improve. There is a little bit of boilerplate required in the generation of the SDKs and the main.go for the provider, but other than that, like people's authoring experience for Pulumi native providers is going to be drastically improved in the coming days, weeks, and months. And I think that's really exciting to see. So, great work. This all looks fantastic. And I'm really excited to see where this goes in due course. Can you maybe give like a quick 30-second to a minute overview on what's coming next, or when do you think people will be able to start using this new framework?
So the basic idea at the moment is done. We are refining bits of API. We're working very hard right now on the rest of the experience. So once you have this part, we have the SDK generation boilerplate. We have the actual publishing of the plugin via GitHub. We have getting into the registry. That is all going to become drastically easier in the near future. Right now, the current project is to get the entire experience from I have an idea, it would be cool if there was a short provider, to it's published in the registry and available. I think the priorities are simple, painless, and quick. So we're working on all of that.
Awesome. Well, I
It's
mean,
coming
we've
down the
managed
pipe.
to write a provider with a single resource in like under an hour, and that was you having to explain things to me as we go along. So I hope people see the value in this new framework and the benefits to adopting it. Like, it's a huge quality of life improvement for people that want to build Pulumi providers.
Yeah, I'm glad. I certainly hope so. Also, just for my own edification, I will post a working version of this example, getting at the last little issues in, I think, the path and getting Yarn to work and providing a real version. And I will post that to GitHub with a link to be determined.
All right. Well, just let me know when that's
So
available. I'll add it to the show notes and make sure it's available for people that are watching this after the fact as well. All right. We've went 1
awesome.
minute over, but it's been an absolute pleasure, Ian, sitting here and working through this together. So I want to say thank you for spending some time with me, and I'm really excited about this new framework. And can't wait to see what happens coming. Can't wait to see what comes next. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Have fun. Thank you very much. Bye.